Hi everyone, and welcome back to Insights from Insight. I'm Amanda Armstrong from Insight Education Academy, and today I want to start with a number. I want you to count how many times you repeated yourself yesterday. From wake up in the morning to go brush your teeth at night, every single time you said, did you do the thing? I already told you, every instruction you gave more than once. My guess is that it's somewhere between 30 and 80. And that's not a parenting failure. That's a clue about what's going on in your child's brain. Today, we're talking about working memory and why repetition actually makes the problem worse, and 5 strategies that actually work. I know it's summer, and so summer amplifies the amount of time that you spend with your kids, and there's no teacher providing structure, no classroom routine, no bell schedule. Every single transition is on you, so you are consistently and probably constantly reminding your kids over and over again to do the things that you ask them to do. So I understand that number may be a little higher simply because it's July. But I also know that your frustration is possibly increasing with that number as well. You're not imagining it. You are definitely repeating yourself constantly. And each repetition costs you executive function energy. So the way that it works is we get stuck in this vicious cycle. So you repeat, they learn to wait for the loud version, you get louder, the relationship gets strained, and you feel guilty, and then you overcompensate, and then you start all over. I have been fighting this for years. With 4 kids, you can just imagine the number of times I have to repeat myself on a daily basis. Eventually, I created a rotation for their household contributions. I don't know if you've been listening, but I call chores contributions. They live here, it's not chores. They're not helping me. They live here. They should contribute. So eventually I created a rotation, and it was super complicated because there were 2 different timeshares running, and we had a different number and a different set of kids in the house at any given time. So it was really complicated. I ended up with this 28-day cycle and built an Excel to plug in the dates for which kids did which chore on which day. It challenged all of my organization and planning skills, and to be honest, it took at least a year to set up. I put it on a digital calendar in our drop space. I printed it out for them, and I had it on laminated checklists because each kid used a different method of reminder. And it has taken 3 years to get to the point where I don't have to ask whose turn it is to walk the dog on a daily basis 4 times. Admittedly, I do still have to ask at least once or twice a week, but I will say that each one of my kids will list out a to-do list for school or take their extracurriculars into consideration when making plans with friends. And I'm sure them getting older is part of that, but it was also the modeling and the consistency with which using executive function skills out loud and on purpose with them that has created some type of at least awareness that they can plan and manage their time on their own. So let's discuss the science part. One of the first things to understand is the difference between long-term, short-term, and working memory. Obviously, long-term are those memories that go deep inside the brain, and you can recall specific events, you can recall different smells or different tastes or whatever of different moments in your life. Your short-term memory is where you hold specific pieces of information that you may not necessarily need in 5 years. And then there's working memory, and this is the part that's the executive function. So working memory is the brain's sticky note. It can hold info temporarily while you use it. It's a little different than short term. Short term is something like what's for dinner and you're remembering for 7 days straight. But when we're talking about working memory, it's pulling information for tasks that you are currently engaged with. And you can only adults can hold between 4 to 7 items, probably closer to 4, but with kids, it is much less. And them being tired, stressed, distracted has the same effect on their brains as those things do on ours. So when we're tired, our working memory is less effective. The same goes for them. So if your kid has a big science project due, their working memory is going to be functioning on a lower level than most days. And those kinds of things are not something that we necessarily always take into consideration when we're asking whose turn it is to walk the dog. The other thing to note is that this working memory function has nothing to do with intelligence. Kids with lower working memory are not less intelligent. They lose the instruction before they can actually act on it. The info falls off the sticky note. One of my kids has solved his lower working memory issue with intense concentration and focus on a task. When he knows he is supposed to do something like maybe empty the dishwasher, he cannot do anything else until he empties the dishwasher. He has overcome his task initiation issues with this intense concentration as well. There's no more constantly reminding or asking him again. He will do it. We will have to work on his cognitive flexibility later, but because this intense concentration is helping him actually initiate tasks and get things done, I'm leaving it alone for now because his side quests have dramatically reduced. And eventually we can work on that cognitive flexibility to create a little bit more balance, but he is no longer going off on these tangents in a completely different room of the house when I thought he was going to empty the dishwasher. He actually stays in the kitchen until it's done. The other thing about working memory is that being able to follow and complete multi-step instructions is related to working memory tasks. And you can see this actually in math problems, especially word problems. If your fourth grader consistently only completes the first step in a math problem, this isn't laziness or an IQ issue. It's really about the working memory. It's a skill problem related to executive function. I can't even tell you how many hours I've spent with my own kids and students having them label the steps of math problems. And at home, something like go upstairs, brush your teeth, put on PJs, and pick a book is 4 different items to hold while trying to walk up the stairs. That's way too much for a lot of developing brains. So doing something like having a visual checklist at the top of the stairs is a great way to accommodate that low working memory issue. Having a visual checklist at the top of the stairs is a great accommodation for this. Any steps you can externalize so that they can just see it will reduce the amount of repeating you have to do. The other problem is that with stress, it reduces the working memory capacity. So when you repeat louder, you're actually adding stress and you're making the brain less capable of processing the instruction. This is really, really hard as a parent. So you're shrinking the size of the sticky note the louder you get. And if you're reaching the point where your next sentence's volume will be higher, we've got to learn to pause and take a breath before speaking, because if you come at them with a louder volume, it's just going to slow their working memory down. They will only be thinking about you yelling at them instead of the task that you were trying to ask them to do. The other thing to consider is that unfortunately with this ask, repeat, get louder, feel guilty cycle that we get stuck in, it actually creates a pattern that we've trained our kids for. So when you repeat something 5 times before acting, you've trained their brain that instructions 1 through 4 are non-urgent. Their brain is being efficient, not defiant. So if your kid consistently gets PJs on but never brushes their teeth, even though it's the first thing you say, it's just that their working memory has become overloaded with too much information and they're ignoring the first instruction and only picking up on the last thing. And we unfortunately have trained them in that way, and you have to break that pattern to kind of fix it. It's also really important to understand that all of these are manifestations of ADHD. According to research, ADHD is a performance deficit, not a knowledge deficit. They know what to do, but they can't consistently access it at the right time. Working memory is one of the most affected executive function skills in those with ADHD. So keeping that in mind, if your kid has ADHD or anyone in your house has ADHD, it's important to understand that working memory is going to be one of the heavier areas where ADHD has an impact. So what do? There's 5 strategies that I want to teach you today. One is to say it once and point to it. So creating visual checklists can bypass working memory entirely. The info is external, not internal. So you tape it to the door, the mirror, the wall, wherever your kiddo can see, and you can point to it the first time you ask. So instead of giving 4 steps to get ready for bed, you can say, it's time to start your bedtime routine, and point to the sign at the top of the stairs. That gives them the opportunity to work through those steps on their own. Second is to get into their world and walk over to them when they are not necessarily listening. Get on their level. Walk over to them, make eye contact, touch their shoulders, say their name, and then instruct. Because I have 4 kids, I was just doing this naturally. I would say, hey, kid number 1. And I would say their name out loud every time I was giving a specific instruction. And you cannot shout from the other room. Shouting from another room is not going to help. You got to make sure you're in their physical space so that you know that they are actually paying attention to you. And break multi-step instructions into single steps. And it feels slower, and I know it can be frustrating, but it actually is faster than repeating yourself 7 times. And then use this when-then framing of your sentences. So things like, when your shoes are on, then we will go to the park. Creating this cause plus effect plus a motivation. And this is planning instead of demanding from them. This framing of your sentences can be really helpful for neurodiversities that include a defiance aspect to them. And always check for understanding. Make them repeat it back to you. Say, what's the plan? Have them tell it back to you. And if they can't, then it didn't land. So then you're repeating the instructions again, and don't get louder with it. Just repeat the instructions again so that they can get the information into their head. And knowing that they didn't get it the first time can reduce your frustration. And these strategies are not just for neurodivergent kids. They work for all developing brains. And they also work for adults. So things like think about how many times you've walked into a room and forgotten why for yourself. There are strategies that you can put in place for yourself as well. And Module 2 of my Burnout Blueprint course covers working memory in depth. The link is in the show notes. Next week, we're going to talk about how traditional parenting advice completely fails neurodivergent families and some strategies that may actually work for you. That topic really hits home for me, and I'm really excited to talk about it. Thank you for listening this week, and I will talk to you next week.